They fired him. Let that sink in for a second. The guy who created Apple, the face of innovation, the man who started it all in a garage with nothing but a dream, was kicked out of his own company. One boardroom, a few signatures, and boom, gone. Steve Jobs walked out of Apple with no title, no plan, and every camera in Silicon Valley pointed at his failure. He was 30, a college dropout, officially unemployed, and for the first time in years, alone. But before we get to the comeback, before the iPhone, the empire, the legacy, you need to understand the man who got back up when the world wrote him off. Let's go back. He wasn't born into power, or privilege, or even stability. Steve Jobs was born in 1955 and given up for adoption. His biological mother was a young college student. His father, a man from Syria. They couldn't raise him, so they handed him to strangers. But here's where it gets interesting. The family who was supposed to adopt him backed out, so Steve ended up with Paul and Clara Jobs, a blue-collar couple. No college degrees, no big dreams. Just simple people. But they gave him everything. Paul showed him how to build with his hands. Clara gave him love and belief. And even though money was tight, they made it work. Steve wasn't a golden child. He was curious, wild, restless, and rebellious. School bored him, rules annoyed him. But give him a problem to solve, something to take apart and rebuild. And the kid lit up. He wasn't like the others, and deep down, he knew it. Fast forward to college. He goes to Reed College, then drops out after 6 months. Why? Because he hated wasting his parents' money on classes he didn't care about. But instead of going home, he stuck around. He slept on friends' floors, returned Coke bottles for food money, walked across town to get free meals at the Hare Krishna temple. He was broke, but curious, and hungry for something bigger. He took calligraphy classes for fun. That would later inspire the design of the first Mac. He experimented with psychedelics, said LSD was one of the most important things he ever did. He went to India to find himself. But what he found was clarity. And when he came back, he had a fire in his eyes. He wanted to build something different, something that mattered. Back in California, Steve reconnects with a shy tech genius named Steve Wozniak. Woz was the builder. Jobs was the dreamer. And together, they were dangerous. In 1976, inside a tiny garage in Los Altos, they built the first Apple computer, literally, on a wooden workbench. No money, no business plan, just two guys, a soldering iron, and a vision. They wanted to make computers, personal, not for labs, not for scientists, for people. And guess what? People wanted it. Within a few years, Apple exploded. They went from selling parts in plastic bags to being on the front cover of Time magazine. Steve Jobs was only 25 and already a millionaire. By 30, he was running a billion-dollar company. He didn't wear suits. He didn't speak corporate. He wore sneakers, spoke like a rebel, pitched like a preacher. But he demanded perfection, and not everyone could handle that. Employees admired him and feared him. He was intense, emotional, sometimes brutal, but he made people do the best work of their lives. Then came 1985. The Macintosh, Steve's baby, wasn't selling as expected. Sales were dropping. The board started to panic. And Steve? He was clashing with the CEO he hired himself, John Scully. The tension boiled. One side had to go, and it wasn't going to be the board. They pushed Steve out, from the company he built, the company he named, the company he bled for. He was devastated and humiliated. He later said, "Getting fired from Apple was the best thing that ever happened to me." But at that moment, it didn't feel like a blessing. It felt like death. Steve disappeared from the spotlight. No speeches, no product launches, no press. He traveled, read obsessively, wandered inside his own mind. He was 30, and the world saw him as a washed-up has-been. But he wasn't done. Not even close. In the shadows, he started over. He built a new company, Next, focused on making high-end computers for education and research. It wasn't a commercial success, but it was where he experimented, where he learned how to lead differently. And then, there was Pixar. He bought it from George Lucas. Yes, that George Lucas. At first, it was just a tiny animation studio no one cared about, but Jobs believed in stories, in visuals, in magic. And after years of struggle, Pixar released Toy Story. The first fully computer-animated movie, a global hit. It changed animation forever. And suddenly, Steve Jobs wasn't just the computer guy, he was a storyteller. By the mid-90s, Apple was falling apart. The company was bleeding money. Its products were messy, boring, and uninspired. Competitors were catching up, and fast. They had no vision, no clear leader, and no hope. So guess what they did? They called Steve Jobs, the same guy they once kicked out, the guy they humiliated. They asked him to come back. Not everyone at Apple wanted him, but they were out of options. So Steve returned, quietly, as an advisor at first. But that didn't last long. Steve took over. He slashed products, fired teams, simplified everything. And then, he started designing. The iMac came first. Colorful, bold, weird. People laughed, but it sold. Big. Then came the iPod. 1,000 songs in your pocket, then iTunes, then the MacBook, and finally, the iPhone. One product, one launch. And the world changed. He didn't just bring Apple back. He turned it into the most valuable company in the world. But while the world celebrated, Steve was battling something darker. In 2003, he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. He tried everything: special diets, alternative treatments, surgeries, but it kept coming back. And through it all, he worked. He launched the iPad, led Apple, gave speeches, and prepared for the end. In 2011, he stepped down as CEO, and a few months later, he was gone. But he didn't just leave behind a company. He left behind a revolution. Steve Jobs wasn't a saint. He wasn't always kind, or patient, or easy to work with. But he believed in something most people forget: the power of bold ideas. He believed products should be beautiful. That simplicity was sacred. That great work takes obsession. That you, the misfit, the dropout, the rebel, can change the world. He once said, "We're here to put a dent in the universe." And he did. So if you've ever been told you're too intense, too weird, too much, remember Steve. He got fired, laughed at, rejected, diagnosed, and still, he built something that touched billions, not because he played it safe, but because he never settled. Your story isn't over. Even if you've hit rock bottom, even if they've written you off, even if you're alone, you just need one thing: belief in your idea, in your mission, in yourself. Because the man who changed the world started in a garage, got kicked out, came back, and never gave up.